Hello and welcome. This lecture is about the summary. A summary is an analysis, and in this lecture I'm going to explain that. I'm going to help you to understand how to do summaries, and I'm also going to help you to see that summaries are a foundational skill that depends on your ability to analyze. It depends on your ability to take something apart and rebuild it into a new whole. We're going to take a leisurely walk from analysis to summary, so feel free to go get a cup of coffee or your favorite drink to enjoy while you learn. What is an analysis? An analysis is how we understand our world and how we plan for changes. This is the first map of its kind showing the underlying types and ages of rock. Someone hoping to start a mining company or to try to ship a mineral might want to see this. A historian or a geologist might also try to start to put together the history of the world with this map. This is another kind of map, helping us to understand that location and income have disproportionate effects on incarceration. You might look at this, feel indignant, and want to advocate for change. There are two ways to approach an analysis. The first is to pull something to pieces. What are the component parts, and how do they interact? You can imagine taking the petals from a flower one by one to see how they are joined and what they do. To give you an example, imagine that you live in a neighborhood overrun by cats. You might just curse all cats, or you might decide to look at each one individually by putting some kind of tracker on each one. Then you might discover that they all go back to one of 3 colonies at night. You could see that 2 of the colonies were in one township and another was in the other township, so you would share the problem and the solution by getting the neighboring township to do the colony on their land, which is, trap, spay, and release, and you would do the same on your for your 2 colonies. That way, you share the problem and you come up with a different solution. Take a whole, turn it into parts, examine each part, make changes to how you divide them or enact them or combine them, and create a different whole or a different outcome. Another approach is to look at a series of different parts, looking for similarities. Consider if you had a library filled with books, some on cooking, some murder mysteries, and some on science and literature. What do you do? Here you could bring together like items and then make a decision. Assuming that this library was a private library and nobody had ever organized it. So now you're going to start to organize it. You could decide that you've got all this library and you're going to organize all the like things together: cooking, murder mysteries, kids books, science, literature. And you could get rid of the murder mysteries and the cookbooks and the kid-oriented, child-oriented books, and you could just keep the science and literature, and you could become an academic library. Alternatively, you could get rid of everything except the cookbooks, and you could add to your cookbook collection. You could become a specialized library in cooking and food history. Now let's consider the obvious and day-to-day things where you need to do an analysis. You've all seen an older car with a check engine light, the dreaded check engine light. And what is it? It could be any number of things. You need to figure it out, and you need to find someone who can help you run a diagnosis, and then you have to hope you can afford to repair it. Another quite different example from my childhood was the way one of my grade school teachers managed her classroom. Good kids were quiet kids. Bad kids were wriggly, noisy kids. Good kids were allowed to sit quietly and learn, and kids who were too wriggly or too noisy were made to sit at the desk with their heads down. Mostly, of course, those kids with their heads down were boys. Is it any wonder that it wasn't a very happy place? So we've looked at the analysis, which is taking something apart to examine it, and also putting something together to make new opportunities or new decisions. What makes a summary an analysis? A summary requires an analysis because the larger work is divided into key points, and the key points are built into a shorter, smaller whole. The analysis is figuring out what the main points are. Usually they are located in the first topic sentence, but not always. Look to the first and last sentence of a paragraph for the main ideas. If you need to summarize an article, start by reading the whole thing. Then read it a second time and start taking notes either along the margin or somewhere else. List the main points as you are reading. I've given you an example here from an article about recycling that was published in the National Geographic in 2020. And here's another page from that article where I've continued taking notes on the key points. It's not all of the pages, but it's just a sample here. Then I try to identify the meaning of the whole article and write that out. You can see that I have suggested in a single sentence what the whole article is about. We are not doing enough to achieve a circular economy. Then I put my points together and I read the whole thing. As I said, I read it a second time. I try to move all the main points to one spot and think about them and figure out which ideas contribute most to the main idea. And after I've gotten my notes together, I put them in order, I compare them, hope I can make some sense of it. And in my blue box here, I attempt to do that. Through a series of interviews with NGOs, business owners, and activists in many industries, Robert Kunzig tells readers of National Geographic what a world without trash could look like. He explains and promotes the idea of a circular economy with a glimpse into various ongoing efforts, including metal, clothes, food, packaging, and energy recycling. He believes, as do most of the people he interviews, that we aren't doing enough to eliminate trash and waste. He says, "All the trash we make is not a sign that we're evil. It's a sign we're a little dumb." Now this example has the qualities that we do expect in a good summary. It is aimed at an audience, it is shorter than the original, it is complete, it is objective, and it has a direct quote to illustrate the main idea. The rule of thumb for how short a summary should be is generally the requirement set by the audience or the assignment. But generally speaking, an article or a short book or a movie becomes 1 to 2 pages maximum. A longer book might get 2 to 4 pages. Often, a very long work will get a single paragraph. In ordinary life, you will encounter examples in your readings that are a hybrid that lean toward a critique. Movies and books are frequently summarized, but they indicate the author's opinion of the work in question. Now, the most common reason you will be reading an academic summary, what's called an abstract, is that you are attempting to figure out if an article is a good article for you to read. And soon you'll be reading an article that you need to summarize. I hope this method will help you to feel confident in your work. As a final note, when you are doing an academic summary, don't forget to put the author's name and the title of the article and the source, journal or newspaper or book chapter, in your first paragraph.